gentlemen, and welcome to the 5th edition of the Bombers BigFooty podcast for season 2021. I am your host once again, Boncer34, and I am joined this evening by a man who may be hosting in future weeks. I may take a break, but for tonight, it's him and me. Jade, how are you?
Going all right, and I've got to tell you, you're probably lucky to have me this week because after that win on the weekend, I have been touching myself and have emerged chafed and blistered at the moment, so going okay, but maybe not so okay.
And the other man this evening, we were meant to have the man, the mystery, the myth that is Doss, but he has pulled out late this evening, so we have turned to a favourite of the podcast, and that is Pros. How are you this evening, mate?
I'm back, baby. Look, we can't win them all, and unfortunately we couldn't get Doss on for tonight, but you know what, I'll see what I can do to keep the mood upright after that big win.
Well, I was about to say, you do say we can't win them all, but Jade, I'll jump straight to you. We bloody won. I mean, there was a lot of doom and gloom. Now, you weren't on last week's podcast, but there was a lot of, I don't think we can win. They're probably a better side than what we are. And holy we managed to win. I mean, did you see? I mean, you're going to tell us you saw it coming because you like to pretend that you're all-knowing and can see into the future. But seriously, that was unbelievable, especially when we went 5 goals down.
Like most people, I think I tried to sort of play the calm, realistic point of view in terms of we were going over to Perth. Whilst I know we've won over there before a number of times, the reality was we're a side that's sitting, 4-6 pre-game, coming into a game against West Coast who hadn't been beaten in Perth. The reality was you're looking at it and going, look, all we can really hope for is that we keep playing the way that we've been playing, that we put in a good performance, that we're pressuring the side. But the reality is we're probably going to get done by 4 or 5 goals here. So to answer your question, no, I did not see that coming at all. The way that they not only came back from a deficit there, but just ran the Eagles into the ground, I've got to tell you, could not have been more impressed with the performance. Easily our best performance of the year. And that bodes really well for the rest of the year when a lot of us, myself included, were thinking our best football is probably likely to come in the second half of the year.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of us did predict that the second half of the year would be when the team would start to shine because the players would start to gel, the youngsters would have a bit of run in their legs and become good. And we certainly seem to have jump-started that and started it a lot earlier than any of us predicted. Pros, I will come to you and ask for your thoughts, but just before you go to your thoughts, I'll just say to you, I've said it to a lot, especially to you, over the past few weeks, that I think our weakness has been our key position backs, but they were immense on Saturday night. I mean, Kennedy kicked 3, but he never felt like he really took hold of the game. Darling got absolutely by Laverde. He kicked 1, but other than kicking 1, he did nothing. Now, tall backs on Saturday night were, for me, our strength, and the intercept marking was just unbelievable. Do you think maybe now perhaps we were a little bit over-concerned about that? And what were your general thoughts and takeaways from Saturday night?
I think it would be an overstatement to say that we had no right to be concerned, but holy Jade and Laverde, where's he come from this year? I mean, in a year where, we've been pretty complimentary of him in his transition into the back line, I think that was his crowning performance. Like, Jack Darling has been one of the form forwards of the competition, and he was absolutely neutered by Jade and Laverde. And I guess on top of that, I mean, Josh Kennedy had spits and spats where he looked like he might sort of get away from us, but on the whole, it was a fantastic defensive effort. And Jordan Ridley as well is another option where he absolutely shut down Liam Ryan and basically keeping the neutered theme just rendered him absolutely sterile.
Yeah, he did. And it was an impressive effort from the defensive back 6 or back 7, depending on how you look at it now. But again, and Pros, we go on about him every week, but I'm going to do it again. Well, actually, we go on about both of them every week. Darcy Parish and Zach Merritt, again, in the middle, got it started for us. They're fast becoming our best midfield duo that we've seen in a very long time. I mean, we did have Job and Heppel when they were both up and running in the middle. And even, I suppose, Goddard was there as well. But have we had a better 2 players in form in the middle in, say, the past 20 years?
Look, I mean, it's hard to think of a combination. Potentially, the only one that really does come to mind is Joe Watson and Brent Stanton in that sort of first half of 2012. From memory, in that year, obviously, Joe went on to win the Brownlow, but I'm pretty sure Brent Stanton halfway through the year was second on the count. So Failing that, by the way, I mean, it just come from nowhere. I think I saw a stat posted on the Essendon board that the Merritt and Parish handball received a handball 2 combination, I think first and fourth, respectively, like if you sort of inverse them. So out of nowhere, they've just formed a really great partnership there. And obviously it's complemented by McGrath too. So I mean, it's fantastic to see, and long may it continue.
Now, Jade, I know how much you love to talk about those two boys in the midfield, so I will let you get to them. But I'll also just throw out to you Dyson Heppel. Now, a lot of people said that it was his best game for the year, and it absolutely was. It was a real throwback to when he sort of started and dominated on that half-back flank. Personally, I think he's been pretty good throughout the year, but obviously Saturday night was clearly his best game for the season. Is that going to be the peak for him, or do you think that now he's sort of working back, because he's obviously coming back for long injuries, that we may start to see that kind of game more often?
I think the thing with Hep is he's one of those players that tends to come back from injury or lay off relatively slowly. And Stringer's probably another one, which probably doesn't bear fruit this week so much. But they need to work themselves into form and into games. And I think it's got to do with dealing with the pace of the game and just understanding what your role is in the team. I think the thing with Heppel, he has been playing okay. But I do think some of the criticism that was levelled against him probably a little bit earlier in the year, it was fair. He wasn't playing particularly well. He didn't look like he was quick of mind, I suppose is the way to put it. But, geez, he was sharp on the weekend. Like, he was getting himself into position. He was taking some fairly big and important grabs. He was directing traffic very well. He was putting the ball where it needed to be. Very hard to fault his game, and I suppose his last month of football has been very, very good. But I got to tell you, the highlight for Hep just before they sung the song, and look, I could be misquoting him a little bit, but boys, let's give this one some fucking juice. Is a big tick for me.
We've just made sure that Beery's got a good use of the bleep button there. But yes, no, he was definitely up and about after the game, and it was great to see him with such passion, and it was great to see the whole playing group with such passion after the game. Again, some of the youngsters did stand up. Now, I actually thought Nick Cox was fairly quiet on Saturday night, Jade, but even then, he still managed to kick a goal and get involved, especially that tackle on Nat Nui. The other one, of course, is Archie Perkins. Now, I'll let you just unleash here, Jade. How good can Archie Perkins and Nick Cox be? I mean, Saturday night, I think we saw the future.
I think as far as Cox is concerned, and everybody loves a big Cox, yeah, it was probably one of his quieter games of the year. It doesn't mean it was a poor game. I think he still ended up with 9 or 10 touches and a goal. But I think the fact that you've got this player, a first-year player, that you're expecting game-changing performances from, that when he's having a 10 disposal, 1-goal game, or whatever it may be, that you're going, oh yeah, he was a little bit quiet, says a lot about how he's going. The fact that we're in round 11 and this bloke hasn't been nominated for the Rising Star is it's gone beyond astonishing to now it's sort of a running joke that surely the people at the AFL have picked up on here, and they're just trying to drag this out as long as they possibly can. I had a look today, and I think he's second in betting for the Rising Star. The instant he's nominated, he'll be a raging favourite, and he should win this award fairly easily. But that's how good he's going. Now, as far as Archie Perkins is going, every time I see that bike, I'm feeling a little bit sexual. That sidestep he's got going, and the thing is, he's doing it every time he's got his hands on the ball and people still aren't picking up on it. This kid is going to be a superstar. The comparisons that I make in terms of players, and I hate to go this high, but I've got no choice but to do it. He looks like a young James Hird. That is literally what he's looking like at the moment. He moves with time. He's making players around him look a little bit foolish with his movements on the ground. He's looking like he's going to be a danger up forward. He's definitely going to be playing through the midfield. With these two players, I know we haven't seen a lot of Zach Reid at the moment, and obviously second year Harry Jones. We are absolutely stacked with elite level young talent at the moment.
I'll throw to you, Pros. How do you see the youngsters? What did you think they were like on Saturday night?
Yeah, they're all right. But in all seriousness, no. As Jade said, it is a little bit of a joke now that we've concluded round 11 and none of the trio of Cox, Perkins or Jones has been nominated yet. Cox, I thought, was a bit quiet on the weekend. I think it was a graphic came up on screen that he had 4 touches and a goal about halfway through the third quarter, which I'm like, I haven't really noticed him. Or I guess contrary to that, I haven't really noticed the lack of him. But he really came on in the fourth as well. But Archie Perkins, I think, was the real story out of the weekend. He was just fantastic. As Jade mentioned, just his ability to sidestep, to have the core strength to be able to withstand tackles. There was some real superstar qualities there. And I could see a little bit of James Hird, but I tell you what, I see a little bit of Patrick Dangerfield as well. So it's going to be exciting times in about 2-3 years once these players start to come on and they combine with that sort of 14 of 16 draft core as well.
I probably disagree with you both in that it's a bit of a joke they haven't been nominated for the Rising Star. I think they've been very good this year and they have absolutely shown a lot of glimpses, but I don't think either of them have really put together a 4-quarter performance. I mean, Archie's performance on Saturday night was very good, but Trent Rivers was also very good for his nomination this week as well. So I don't think yet you can point to a player that's been nominated that doesn't deserve it. But of course, putting my Essendon hat on, it's an absolute travesty that those 3 haven't been nominated yet. And the AFL is literally just doing it to keep Essendon down.
I mean, that's just accepted law, isn't it?
It certainly is on our board. Now, there is one man that I also want to talk about, and Jade, I'll just hold tight before I ask you. We'll go to Pros first, because I know that, Jade, you're going to love talking about him. But Kyle Langford was immense on Saturday night. He ended up with 28 disposals. He managed to kick a goal. He had 9 marks, 4 tackles. I think his metres gained was just over 400. He was the Kyle Langford that we all know he can be and can be consistently. We're still looking for this to be a regular performance, not an outstanding performance that happens once every 3 to 4 weeks. But Pros, he was very good on Saturday night.
Oh, he was fantastic. And then once again, he's reopened a debate about what his best position is. I think probably only a few weeks ago, we were pretty much all concluded that a forward, well, a half forward was probably his role. But now he starts putting performances like that, and it just makes you wonder where his best position might be. He's got the poise, he's got all the traits that you could want. It's just about trying to put it together and have that physicality and have the, I guess, the level of mental acceleration. Say like a, not to harp on about the comparison, but like a Scott Pendlebury has, where that sort of extra half second is organic and he's able to get away with it every time. He's starting to sort of iron that out now. We're starting to see what could be close to the full package of what Kyle Langford will end up being.
Kyle Langford, the midfielder. If only somebody had called that a few years ago. What do you say? I mean, other than Jade, you were right. Kyle Langford, the midfielder, is the player that we drafted him to be. He is the player that we thought he could be. He's been played out of position for much of his career. We've been using his height to cover our deficiencies in the forward line. The reality is that this guy needs to be playing in the guts. I'm more than happy for him to play on the wing because he's a smart disposer of the ball. He's now grown into a leader of the club. This guy is comfortably in our best 10 players and will be there for at least the next 5 or 6 years.
Sorry, can I just jump in there? I reckon that's an excellent point that you raised there, Jade. His leadership qualities. He's probably one of the unsung leaders of this young core as well. I mean, everyone likes to point to McGrath, to Ridley, but Kyle Langford, just some of the stories you hear around the traps of his level of leadership and development and standing up against what might be some senior players when they're not doing what is expected of them. I tell you what, in another lifetime, he'd be a smoky chance to be a next captain. But as it is, I'm just blown away by the level of maturity and leadership he has been displaying.
The other bloke that I think went all right on Saturday night, and I mean, I think if you look at pure stats, Nat Nui certainly won more taps. But Andrew Phillips, again, he is a journeyman ruckman. Let's be honest, he's not ever going to be a superstar ruckman. But geez, he has filled in fantastically for us since Sam Draper went down. I mean, he has been a very good stopgap option this year. And Jade, I mean, is there room for him and Draper in the one side, or is that pushing it a little bit too far?
You're in a position at the moment where Draper is clearly an all-Australian quality ruckman in terms of his talent and what he can bring to the game. He's an extremely talented player. We know what he's likely to bring us if he can get a fair run on the paddock from an injury perspective. But we're in a position at the moment that even though he's coming back from injury, Phillips is doing nothing to be dropped from the side. And I think it would be very unfair and kind of a bit of a throwback to the Essendon of old, where we're picking players based on their names versus their performance. I don't think you can drop him. I think the one major advantage we've got with both Phillips and Draper is that they're both very, very mobile as far as ruckmen are concerned. So it is entirely possible that we could potentially play both of them in the same side. I'd suggest Draper probably takes the majority of the ruck duties with Phillips filling in. And you probably saw that on the weekend. You know, Nat Nui, and we all know that Nat Nui is absolute class as far as tap ruckman is concerned. You know, he did beat Phillips in the ruck, but Phillips made himself useful around the ground. He made himself a dangerous target. He was able to keep Nat Nui accountable around the ground as well. So I think you can potentially play both of them in the same side. The one thing I would say is if you're going to play both of them, that means you can't really play Peter Wright. And again, Wright himself has really done nothing over the last couple of weeks to deserve being dropped from the side. So it's one of those selection conundrums that you like to have in terms of, it's a hard call to make, but geez, it's a good call. It's a good call and it's a good position to be in. And let's not forget, we've still got Nick Bryan waiting in the wings, who looks like he's going to be an absolute talent himself. So from a tall man perspective, and particularly our ruck division at the moment, geez, we're looking good.
Yeah. So I mean, do you think Phillips and Draper fit into the same side? I think we've discussed that. You know, Draper and Bryan could be a way of the future in the Gawn and Jackson mould. Draper and Phillips don't really fill that mould.
Yeah, I'm not really high on the notion of Draper and Phillips being in the same side. I can see it for maybe 1 week if we were to bring Draper back without too much match practice. And can I just say, I don't know who made the decision on the weekend to have Sam Draper play a reserves match wearing a Carlton jumper, but shame on them. And I hope that their house burns down and that they're no longer a part of the Essendon Football Club, because God forbid an image of that leaks, it might just break my heart. But very much on the other end of the spectrum, Draper and Nick Bryan in the same team, I believe that could work much better. But I think Nick Bryan's probably going to have to develop his forward craft a little bit more as well to really complement that relationship.
I was completely unaware that Draper wore a Carlton jumper on the weekend, and I feel incredibly sad for him right now. But I will just, before we move on, I will just quickly ask, and Jade, I'll swing to you, were there any negatives? Now, I know Zaharakis struggled, and I think he got an unfair baking on our board, but, you know, I won't get on my high horse here. If you want to bake him, by all means, go right ahead. But outside of that, is there any other negatives that you took away from Saturday night's game?
I mean, look, you have to touch on it a little bit, and I know you just have. I think we are probably looking at the last couple of senior games for Zaharakis. It's not that he hasn't been a fantastic player for us, and he's really fallen into that category of player that, because he's not a superstar, is often deemed to be a spud. He's not. He never has been. He's been a very good player and a very good serviceman to a club where he very well could have left. But unfortunately, I do think we're getting to that point where he just seems a fraction too slow of mind when it comes to making decisions. And his disposal, it's just not up to the game that we're playing. We're currently playing a game where we are pressuring sides out of possession, and we're taking advantage of those turnovers, and we're moving the ball and scoring very heavily. He's not really working very well in that regard. He did have a decent game. I think it was 2 weeks ago as well. But with the fact that we are starting to get ourselves into a position where we do have selection pressure, I really do think he's probably going to be out of the side. The other thing I would mention is that we have again conceded a relatively high score, or consecutive score, I'd say, where we're allowing lapses in games where our opposition is scoring against us a little bit too easily. That's something that I think will be corrected over time, and I think that we're actually showing that in our performances, you know, particularly over the last 4 or 5 weeks, where we are getting better at that. But that was another negative from the game. But other than that, it's very hard to fault that performance. It really was an across the board game. We weren't relying on the brilliance of one player to get us over the line. So potentially I am nitpicking a little bit, but that would be it for me.
And Pros, we'll swing across to you.
Yeah, I mean, on my end, on the Zaharakis debate, I mean, it's just a matter of, let's look at the players who are just on the fringe of the side at the moment. We've got Braden Ham, we've got Ned Cahill. The question you got to ask yourself is, are we getting any benefit from Zaharakis being in the side over those two? And alternatively, what's the benefit of those two being on the sidelines if the answer is, you know, it's pretty much of a muchness? So I mean, I'm in the camp that we probably are at Zaharakis' last couple of games, and especially when Shield does come back. I think that might be the curtain call. But apart from that, I don't really want to dwell on too many negatives on what was overall a positive night. In the same way that sometimes you just got to throw a loss in the bin and just move on to the next week. I think this is one where you just take all the positives and just leave the negatives to the side and just enjoy what it was. A fantastic win.
So we move across to Richmond, and it is not Dreamtime at the G, it's Dreamtime at Optus. I think some people have been saying Dreamtime at the O, and that sounds absolutely absurd to me, so I refuse to give that nickname any more airtime. A lot of people are saying Richmond are gettable this year. Now, look, they might be gettable, but geez, they're a good side still. I mean, they have a lot of quality running around, even without Lynch there up forward. I mean, they still managed to have Jack Rewald up there. He kicked 5 on the weekend, and then Coleman Jones came in and kicked 4. Even Chol kicked 2. They're still going to be a dangerous side. Jade, where do you think we need to win on the field? So where do you think is the spot we have to absolutely beat Richmond to actually stand a chance on Saturday night?
This is the classic Essendon fault, isn't it? That we do from time to time put in performances like we did over this past weekend and think that all of a sudden we are up with the best teams in the game. Let's not kid ourselves here. Richmond may be down a little bit on performance, but you are talking about a serious football side, a seriously credentialed football side. And one that over the last few years has absolutely pantsed us at every opportunity. So for us, where we're going to need to perform very well is what we've built our game around this year and obviously have been working on under truck, that pressure style of game, being able to worry our opposition out of the football. That's something Richmond's been doing for years. If we fail to do that, or if Richmond are better at that than us this weekend, we will lose. They will beat us. If they are able to worry us out of possession, they will kick a winning score on us. They will walk over us like they've done for years now. So we are really going to need to be on top there. And certainly I would hope that the club, the players and the fans are very much aware that if Essendon takes this game as a foregone conclusion, or if we're definitely going to win this game, or we think we've got this, Richmond will roll us over. So we're going to have to be very careful, and certainly that contested ball and that worrying of the opposition, we're going to have to be right on top.
Yeah, now, Pros, I've got a couple of questions for you. First one is, what sort of crowd do you think we'll get? I mean, we do have a relatively large following in the West. There has been talk it will be a sellout. I think that's a big ask. But do you think we're going to see that sort of crowd? And then my second question is, who goes to Dusty? Now, it has been discussed a little bit on the board, and Heath Dog suggested that Aaron Francis goes to him, and I'm not necessarily against that idea. I actually posted earlier today that I think Laverde is probably the ideal matchup for him, but he has been the number one intercept marker for the past 5 weeks across the league, and you can't do that with Dusty. You can't leave Dusty by himself to go and intercept, or I don't think you can. So I've got 2 questions, essentially. What sort of crowd do you think we'll get, and who goes to Dusty?
Well, on the crowd point, I'm pretty optimistic. I reckon we might get a sellout. I'm looking at it as a similar sort of events to the Dreamtime in the Northern Territory last year, in that it's a game where it doesn't matter what team you support, just how momentous of an occasion it is going to draw a lot of neutrals out, especially in Perth, with the beautiful stadium that they have. So many people are going to be inclined to want to come out and just be a part of that game for the novelty of it. So crowd-wise, I'm hoping it's a sellout, and I'm optimistic that it'll achieve that. When it comes to who matches up with Martin, straight away I don't like the Francis idea, so we'll just put a stop in that one.
Why is that?
Well, with Francis, okay, let's have a look at their key forwards that they've got at the moment. So when it comes to Rewalt, I actually like the Laverde matchup for Rewalt there. And then you got Coleman Jones, which probably you're looking at James Stewart. And then you got Chol, which I think is probably the ideal matchup for Francis, possibly Ridley if you wanted to go down that path. But when it comes to Martin, I'm always tempted to, and I know this completely defeats the purpose of what we already talked about, but I'm in half a mind to try Carl Langford again as like a direct one with player, in the same way that we sort of had him playing midfield against Cripps and Fife a year or two ago. think it's probably the ideal role for him in some respects, for 1 week only sort of thing. But I'd back him in if he actually had a go at it. But in short, I mean, it's Dustin Martin, so there's no perfect answer here. And either way, you're going to be gripping on for dear life.
Yeah, look, it is tough. And I actually think if we're going to look at in the midfield at the centre clearances, I think maybe Jade, we send Jake Stringer to him in the centre clearances. But then, of course, when he runs forward, we don't want Jake running forward with him.
Look, Jake Stringer is not a midfield matchup player. He's a midfield burst player. We're only going to use him there, for 3 and 4 minute bursts. And don't get me wrong, he's very good at that. But I think as a matchup player, that's simply not going to happen. I'll just
jump in there though, Jade. He did go to Pendlebury at more or less every single bounce on Anzac Day, so he was starting most bounces against Pendlebury. I don't see there's any reason why he can't do it against Martin. But then Martin running forward is where I see that falling the out.
I think the major difference that you've got there is that Martin himself is very much a burst player, which Pendlebury is not. And I'm not seeing why you would have Stringer, who, let's face it, is going to be running one way in the midfield, why you would want to blunt that impact in order to have him running with Dustin Martin. Look, I'm certainly not saying that you're wrong, and potentially we could do that. It's just not a decision that I would make.
So I'll go back to you, Jade, and then Pross, I'll get you to jump in straight after. Final thoughts for Saturday night. Do you think we win? Do you think we lose? What sort of margin? Who's going to be the man that leads us to victory if that does occur?
I really hate to do this because I know this is going to backfire on me, but I think we will win this game. I think that the style of game that we're playing at the moment does something that we haven't done for years. And what that is it actually puts us in good stead when playing against Richmond. I think that we currently have a better pressure game than Richmond does. We know that Richmond likes forcing their opponents to turn the ball over. And I think that that's a game that we can beat them at. In terms of individual performances and who's going to win us this game, I know it's probably the simple thing to say, but Merritt and Parrish in the form they're in, they are incredibly dangerous, and they are capable of actually taking advantage of Richmond's midfield and giving us first use of the ball there and helping us to generate those inside 50s that we need. So look, I'm going to call it for a win. I'm not doing it with any real, I suppose, confidence that it's going to happen, but. Yeah, I guess we'll come back next week and we'll figure out whether or not I was right or wrong on that one.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I'm a little bit less optimistic. I'm pretty scarred at this point when it comes to Richmond matchups. I'm a little bit worried that the Richmond that we saw on the weekend with Bolton coming back in and Cochin and so on and so forth had a little bit of a feeling of the old machine just blowing out the cobwebs with a bigger statement game to come this week from them. If we are to win, look, there's a multitude of things that need to go right. Firstly, we need to have an effective forward line that doesn't get dominated in the air by the likes of Bolter and Grimes. We need to have a midfield that really has a fanatical defensive pressure about it, because if we give too much ball on the outside to the likes of Martin and Bolton, we'll get torched. And then up forward, as we discussed on the weekend, just from the weekend, Richmond had so many options to kick a winning score. So a lot needs to go right. And so I'm going to sit on the fence and say that the one person that we need to have a big game is the coach himself, Ben Rutten.
I actually think that's a good shout because, I mean, we know Dimmer will have tactics up his sleeve that Ben obviously hasn't seen because Ben hasn't been at Richmond for the last few years. But we are certainly trying, it feels from the outside, a Richmond game plan ourselves in the high pressure style, especially with the way our defenders push forward, and we saw that on Saturday night. I think, and I honestly can't remember who was commentating the game now, but they highlighted many times that we pushed our defenders high up and we needed a goalkeeper at the back, which we didn't because our defenders were able to intercept so well. So I think the call on Truck is a very good one, and it will be very interesting to see how he matches up against his old mentor. I don't think we're going to get the win, but then I didn't think we'd win against West Coast. So don't take that to the bank by any means. But of course, it was Sir Doug Nicholls' round on the weekend. It's Dreamtime this weekend. I'm not sure if it's Sir Doug Nicholls' round over the 2 rounds. Somebody can jump in and correct me and tell me if it is or isn't if you know.
I think it is, but I'm not 100% sure.
So what we will do now is we will focus on Indigenous players, and they have been a force in the VFL, AFL for a very long time. Now, I'll just jump in and say straight up, my favourite player of all time is Michael Long. I grew up with Michael Long electrifying fans in the early 90s. Now, I think we lost the best years of Michael Long. I don't think anybody would disagree. We lost the best years with Michael Long. His 1993 final series was just something that was unbelievable. The commentators at the time, they weren't talking about if he would win a Brownlow. They were talking about what the reception would be like when he won a Brownlow. And I think our younger fans may forget, because they obviously saw him towards the end of his career when he was that half-forward, sneaky half-forward line player, just how good Michael Long was on a wing and through the middle. He was absolutely phenomenal. And his 1993 grand final is still one of the best games I think I've ever seen anybody play. And I know it's a big call, but that goal running down the wing, which Silvani got, Silvani got nowhere near it. Silvani was closer to the ground than he was to the ball. So for me, Michael Long's been Essendon's best Indigenous player of all time. I think if I was to look at the AFL as a whole, the best I've seen it from an Indigenous point of view is either Peter Matera was very good, but Adam Goodes, I thought Adam Goodes was an absolute superstar, and take away what happened to him at the end of his career and the booing and all that. Just forget all about that. As a pure player, Adam Goodes had it all. This is a bloke that could play ruck, centre-half forward, centre-half back. He could play midfield. He was an out-and-out superstar, and he absolutely deserved both those Brownlows he won, and I think he probably should have got another one somewhere along the lines. Jade, I'll turn to you now. Indigenous players, who do you think's probably been the best you've seen?
I think if you're an Essendon fan and you don't have Lance Franklin in the top handful of Indigenous players that you've ever seen, you are probably suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. The man is a beast. One of the look, he is. He's one of the best players of the last 20 years, comfortably. And as an Indigenous player, he's absolutely up there. So I'd certainly want to give him a shout out, even though it pains me to do so. In terms of Essendon players, you've nailed it completely. I think the only challenger to Michael Long, and I think that the second choice there would be fairly obvious in Gavin Wanganeen. I think you were 100% right in terms of we did lose probably the best years of Michael Long's career. I think his standing as a cultural and societal figure has probably led some to forget or diminish how good a player he actually was. And, for me personally, I'm of the vintage where I was growing up watching Michael Long play and being of Indigenous heritage myself. He was a hero. He was a black man who was running around dominating, the sport that I'd grown up loving. And, he was wearing a red sash doing it. My father was a black man that was often racially vilified because of the colour of his skin, and to see, Michael Long standing up for something. And look, he's not alone here. He's definitely not the only Indigenous player, to have made a stand in this regard. And certainly Nicky Winmar deserves his absolute plaudits for this as well. It's culturally iconic, and it was certainly very special to me. But as a player, absolutely, just a dominant beast. Could tear games apart. He's one of those players that could take a game away from you in 5-minute bursts. He would literally put the game away in that time. Absolutely love him. In terms of something else I'd like to mention in terms of Indigenous players that have been the most fun to watch, which is not necessarily the best. For me, there are two that stand out at Essendon that I just absolutely enjoyed watching play, and that was Andrew Lovett. Loved it. He's never going to be accused of being the best Indigenous player that we've ever had, but that turn of speed, that burst coming out of the middle was just fun to watch. And anytime he was near the ball, your eyes were glued to the screen or the ground if you were watching at the ground. Absolutely fantastic. And the second one, possibly a little controversial considering the exit, is probably Paddy Ryder, who I think that when he was given the opportunity to ruck in isolation, proved that he could be an absolute superstar. So really liked watching him play, still like watching him play now. So, yeah, love the Indigenous heritage that our club has. I think it's something to be very, very proud of. I'm really happy about the fact that, when we've chosen to put a statue out the front of the hangar, we've gone with Michael Long first. I think it really speaks to what we are as a club and what our relationship has been. And obviously we need to give Kevin Sheedy a shout out at this point, and just in terms of his tremendous influence in this regard. So for me, it's very much an important round in terms of saying who we are as a football club. I think we've absolutely earned the right to compete in the Dreamtime in the West as it is this year, and I'm really looking forward to the game this weekend.
I really like what you touched on there about players that were fun to watch. And I'm going to throw another name out there before we come to you, Pross, and that's Derek Kickett. Like anybody who never saw Derek Kickett play, I urge you, and I mean, I'll be honest, I don't remember him so much as a player. I have watched his highlights on YouTube. He was a phenomenal footballer. He was absolutely unbelievable. And whilst I understand the circumstances, and while I understand that he also played his part in not being told directly by Sheedy, I still don't think I'll ever really support the fact that he did not play the 1993 grand final. I think that's probably, and I think Sheeds, in his heart of hearts, would agree that's probably one of his few regrets he has as a coach, the way that happened. And I certainly think that if Derek Kickett had been there at Essendon in 1996 instead of the Sydney Swans, I think we very well would have seen a different result. I also think if Gavin Manganese had never left, we would have certainly seen a different result in 1999 and 2001. But you're absolutely right about Paddy Ryder. I loved watching Paddy play, and it was heartbreaking when he left. He is still a delight to watch. But yeah, as I said, in terms of fun, I think Derek Kickett definitely deserves a shout out. But Pross, I'll swing to you. Best Indigenous player you've seen at Essendon in league wide, and obviously as Jade's introduced, the one that you've enjoyed the most watching.
Yeah, look, I've got a different perspective, I guess, than the two of you, just purely for the fact that whilst I was a little bit late behind the Long and Wanganeen era, so I'm 28 now. So basically, I was born in '93. So unfortunately, I didn't get the true pleasure of watching their careers in their prime. So I guess when it comes to modern day players, there's a few candidates really. I mean, Paddy Ryder would have to be the obvious one of modern times for us. But God, we've had some fun players over the years, and I was just reminiscing about the that sort of 2005 through to 2008 sort of period, where you had Lovett coming in on Anzac Day and just, I think he might have even won the medal on that day. You had Owen Davey burst onto the scene at the start of 2017. Leroy Jetta came onto the scene. You had Paddy Ryder, obviously, in his infancy. It was a really exciting time. And I guess I wanted to touch on that one, actually, because I'll tell you what, we might have some more fun times to come as well. I don't know if
yes!
Don't know if you've seen the highlights from, I think it was a fortnight ago now, just before the bye, but Jade and Davey coming back for his first game, coming off an ACL, just kicked one of the best underage goals that you'll see. In one of four, actually, that he kicked on that day, and Elwyn Jr. kicked two as well, so that's going to be something to look forward for the next 10 to 12 years when we pick both of them up as father-sons at the end of next year. League-wide, though, it's hard to go past Lance Franklin in the modern era. I mean, he is a marvel. He's terrorised us. He's brutalised us. But goddamn, I've got to respect that bloke and everything that he's done. You talk about players that just drive you through the turnstiles, and I mean, he's Exhibit A. I would pay to watch him play against anyone. And I hope that he does get to play on for another year or two, and he actually does get to play full seasons, because when he's up and running in full flight, he's something that you tell your kids about.
I refuse to acknowledge Lance Franklin purely because of poor old Cale Hooker coming off his hamstring. In the first game back, he had to chase him down the wing not once but twice, which was completely and utterly unfair to poor old Cale. And I'm glad you mentioned the Davey twins, because for anyone listening, we are actually going to do, because we do have the bye obviously after the Richmond game, we are going to do a bit of a switch up next week and have EDPS on to talk to us about the mid-season draft and also some of the under-18 players that are starring this year, and I'm definitely keen to get his thoughts on the Davey twins. But we are coming to my favourite part of the show, and the part that I think you both are looking forward to the least, and that is, of course, Boncer's Quiz. Now, we have had an episode before where you two competed. Pross did manage to get up on that day, but that episode will never see the light of day. So officially, Jade, your record is 0-0. Pross, you are 0-1 because the Grizz beat you last week.
Undefeated, of course.
Undefeated,
Now,
but definitely disputed.
It is, yes, well, you can dispute it all you want, but take that up with Beerfish. So, as always, your names are your buzzers. I'm not going to get you to test them this week because you both know what your names are. And because it is, of course, Sir Doug Nicholls' round, there is a little bit of an Indigenous theme. When I say a little bit, I mean every single question is Indigenous-based for the Essendon Football Club. And as a result, they aren't the hardest questions in the world, so get in quickly. Question number 1. Who is our only Indigenous Brownlow medalist?
Jade.
Oh, Yeah, Jade, I'm going to give it to Jade, and that is a point to Jade. Question number 2. Who is Essendon's only Indigenous Michael Tuck medalist?
Jade.
Yes.
I'm going to go with Michael Long.
Incorrect. Right era, but incorrect. Pros, I'll throw to you.
Dean Rioli.
Incorrect. So I'll let you both jump in when you have a bit of a think. As I said, that was a clue. It was the Michael Long era.
Pros.
Yep.
Stabbing a dark here, but Jay Cockatoo Collins.
No, it's not Shea Cockatoo. So Jade, I'll jump to you, and if you don't get it, I'll tell you the answer.
All right, I'm going to go with Derek Kickett.
No, it's Gavin Wanganeen. I've gone Gavin.
Oh, there you go.
I thought that was too obvious.
The 1993 Foster's Cup when we beat Richmond. It was, of course, Gavin Wanganeen. Alrighty, now this one's a little bit trickier. It is 1-0 at the moment, but I actually think this is Jade's going to get this. So, Pros, I think you might be out of luck, but we'll see how we go. Michael Long was the second Indigenous player to play for the Essendon Football Club. Who was the first? And I'll give you a hint. He was in the 40s and 50s, so it's a long time ago.
Got me out, man.
Yeah, I've got no idea. I feel ashamed, but no idea.
It was Norm MacDonald who played 128 games for us, and I think he would have absolutely had to have played in a few flags from 47 to 53. All right. So as always,
it's a shame that the club doesn't promote him a bit more.
Well, I feel like they do. I feel like I've heard his name mentioned quite a bit when it comes to our Indigenous heritage, but maybe that's just because I'm reading his name at the moment. So, as always, my questions are proving far too difficult, but we are still 1-0 to Jade. This one is a little bit easier. One of them you'll both get quite comfortably. 2 Indigenous players for the Essendon Football Club have played 100 games exactly. Can you name?
Jade.
Pros got in first.
Well, Alwyn Davey.
Yes.
And Dean Rioli.
And Dean Rioli is the other one.
Son of a...
I actually thought Dean Rioli was the easy one there, but then I actually forgot, and I should have realised when you started talking about the Davey twins, Pros, that you were probably across Alwyn playing the 100 exactly. Okay, so this is another fairly easy one, so get ready quickly. Who is our only Indigenous Norm Smith medalist?
Jade.
Jade got in.
Michael Long.
Michael Long is indeed the answer. So that is 2-1, and I believe that is 5 questions because you missed 2. So, Pros, your record goes to 0-2. Jade,
and
you're
still,
1-0.
And still.
Pros, how do you feel?
Well, I feel devastated, and I really want to do an investigation into the cellular reception here because I'm telling you, I'm saying Pros about 1 or 2 seconds before Jade does, and obviously there's a little bit of latency in the line here, but I honestly feel I'm undefeated, undisputed still in my mind. So
you sound like a Carlton fan. You sound like a Carlton fan making excuses for the fact that Adam Sard conceded 4 goals to his direct opponent this week.
Yeah, well, maybe it should have been 5.
I'll tell you what, just on Adam Sard, the footage of him running back to the goal square as his opponent kicked the ball over his head was very damning, and David King was extremely scathing of him on Fox Footy. So if any Essendon fan out there hasn't watched that, by all means go right ahead because I think you'll get a certain distinct pleasure out of it. Although having said that, I'm not in the camp that thinks we should be booing Adam Sard at every chance we get. Alrighty, so thank you once again this evening for joining me, gentlemen. Jade, I'd thank you, but you're going to thank yourself, so I won't bother.
No, not at all. Look, when you're in the presence of greatness like this, undefeated in the quiz, it's it's hard not to thank myself for being here, and you are welcome.
And Pros, thank you for stepping into Doss's shoes. You more than filled them this evening.
Mate, anytime I can step into Doss's shoes, it's a good day. So thank you for having me.
And as I did mention earlier, next week we are, of course, going to have EDPS on to talk about the recruits that we're hoping to see at the end of the year, and also gives a bit of a wrap-up of the mid-season draft, which I believe is actually happening early or later this week, perhaps, or maybe he will be giving us a preview of the mid-season draft, depending on whenever it is. But I will be joined next week by him and the Grizz. So thank you once again to everybody for listening.